my first impression of Japanese culture, basically, people just running across Tokyo Station, being in a rush. And then I took the train to Hiroshima. It's a direct train, super nice, super convenient. And honestly, I just spent the better part of the 4 hours looking outside, like looking through the window, being amazed by the fact that I was in a country that actually had mountains. It's quite nice.
Hi, I'm Zoe, a human being who failed to live a conventional life. I have a deep interest in people and their choices of life. In my podcast, I'll be having conversations with individuals who are open to talk about their mental journeys in life. This season is called My Mental Journey of Migration. 8 guests will share their experiences of living in different cultures. And today we have our guest, Hiddo. Hello, Hiddo.
Hello, hey Zoe, how's it going?
I'm doing very well. So I'm now in Helsinki. Where are you now?
I am in my house in Hiroshima in Japan.
Okay, so can you tell me the time difference now? So for me, now it's 3:50 p.m.
For me, it's 9:50 p.m. I just had a coffee after my dinner today, so I'm sure I can actually talk to you about things. Also, I probably won't sleep tonight, so yeah, this is what you're doing to me.
Oh no! I'm so sorry. Can you introduce yourself to us?
Well, my name is Hiddo. I'm originally from the Netherlands, and I currently work at the University of Hiroshima in Japan as an astronomer. So before this, I was also an astronomer, but then in the Netherlands, and I moved here about a year and a half ago. The University of Hiroshima is not in the city of Hiroshima, but it's like 40 minutes or so outside of it in a smaller town called Higashi Hiroshima, which just means East Hiroshima in Japanese. So that's where I live. That's where I'm right now currently as well.
Can you tell me more about the city, Hiroshima? Because it's apparently a very famous city.
Yeah, it's famous for maybe the wrong reasons. But yeah, so actually this is an interesting time because tomorrow will be the commemoration of the one thing that Hiroshima city is famous for, namely the first city of, well, receiving an atom bomb. Receiving sounds weird. Well, the bomb was dropped on August 6th, 1945. And currently it is August 5th, 2023. So it'll be the commemoration ceremony tomorrow. So this is definitely the main famous thing about Hiroshima, I would say. And I think it's the main reason why people visit the city as well. Because right now where Ground Zero was basically, it's a very beautiful memorial. It's called the Peace Park, where they try and, kind of commemorate what happened to the city. And there's a big museum there as well, which kind of explains what was happening, what was going through the city in the day of the bombing and the aftermath. But of course, nowadays, it's a normal, bustling city. I think there's about 1 million people living there, so it's a pretty big city. And of course, it's quite modern in general because everything was rebuilt after the war. But yeah, so I live in a slightly smaller town, about 40 minutes away from Hiroshima city itself, which is not as famous, but it has one important thing about it which makes it nice, which is that it's famous for its sake, so Japanese rice wine.
Wow.
And 2 minutes away from where I live is the main street in this town, which is called Sakagura Dori, which is basically a street with all the sake breweries on it. So they have, I think, 7 or 8 different breweries on this one street, each making their own sake from the local rice, I guess. So that's the main thing famous about this town.
That's very nice. Are you a fan of sake?
Yeah, I quite like it. I mean, I didn't drink it much before coming to Japan, honestly. I had it maybe once or twice in a Japanese restaurant before. But here it's one of the main alcohols, kind of like what wine is to Europeans, is what sake is here. So it's something you drink quite regularly. Yeah, I mean, I'm at a point where I can kind of taste differences between different sakes. So I kind of have preferences at this moment.
Wow.
Which is nice. I have one favorite local brewery here as well.
Is it cheaper to drink sake than drink wine in Japan?
I think it will be a little bit cheaper to drink sake, but also the wine here is typically not very good.
Oh.
I don't know what wine they have, but it's probably one of the cheapest things that they could buy at a random store. So if you want decently tasting alcohol, you should probably stay away from wine as well. There's this one drink which I hadn't heard of before coming to Japan. It's called highball or highboru, which is whiskey and soda as a mix. It is so tasty. It's really good. There's also a slightly different version where the soda is changed for ginger beer. So I think it's ginger beer and whiskey. And yeah, you should try this, honestly. It's really good.
You said you come to Japan for work. Have you been visiting other countries for a long period of time before you come to Japan?
No, this is my first time really living in a different country. I guess I spent a few months abroad in the UK before, but while I was there, I still had my old place in the Netherlands. So this is my first real experience living abroad, so living outside of the Netherlands.
Usually people get a job offer from a culture that's so far away from their own culture, they would feel a little bit nervous. Were you nervous and were you feel like very excited to, hey, I'm coming, Japan?
Yeah, mostly the last one. I mean, I was really excited to move here in general, which is partially because I had spent a long part of my life in Leiden, which is the city that I lived in before, where I did my undergrad up to my PhD. I feel like I knew that city in and out at that point, and I really kind of wanted to move somewhere else, to move abroad in general, I suppose. But then, yeah, while I was applying for jobs, getting jobs in academia can be quite difficult because there's lots of people, not as much opportunity, or not as much money. So I applied all over the world, basically, without a clear preference of where I wanted to go. And then the university here, they offered me a job. I didn't know the professor I'd be working with, but my PhD advisor knew her quite well. I had 2 Zoom calls with her before, and she was super nice. So I figured, yeah, this seems like a great idea. Let's move to Japan.
That's it? You didn't hesitate?
Not really. I don't think I hesitated that much, actually. I mean, well, also, I wanted a job, so that's, of course, quite important. But then, yeah, Japan seemed like fun. In a way, I was happy that I moved to a country that is not that similar to the Netherlands. If you move to Germany or the UK or something like that, of course, it's a different country, things will be different. But culturally, there's still a lot of overlap. It wouldn't feel maybe as much as a big step to move to one of these countries. So in that sense, maybe this is a bit more adventurous. It sounds strange. I mean, I wasn't looking for adventure necessarily, but well, here I am.
Did you find it challenging to move to Japan?
Overall, I think I didn't find it super challenging. It's really because the local people at the university here took great care to help me get settled. Well, everything is in Japanese, which is a language that is quite far removed from Dutch or English, which are the languages that I speak, which means that it's quite hard to learn. And also, in general, the English level here is okay, but not great. So it would have been very hard to figure out all these things on my own, like getting an apartment or getting a bank account or those kind of things. So because people really helped me with these kind of things, it wasn't as challenging for me to get settled here as I might have feared that it would be. So overall, actually, I think it was really quite smooth.
Do you still remember your feelings when you first arrived in Japan?
I remember when I got off the plane, it was kind of funny because, well, it was in the middle of the pandemic times still, and Japan was really strict that whole time, basically, about the pandemic. They had actually closed off for foreigners for, I think, the better part of a year at that point. So I remember getting off the plane, having to sign a million different types of forms to say that, I don't know, I'm not infected or why I was here. I remember the funny thing was that every 5 meters, there was another person like wearing full, not just face mask, but like full body protective armor, basically guiding you to the next step. Yeah, I remember I had to do a COVID test upon arrival, but instead of just getting a stick up your nose as is normal, they have these saliva tests here. So they send you into a little booth where the wall is plastered with pictures of like fried chicken and lemon and those kind of things to try and get you to drool a bit so you can use this for the COVID test. So I remember that was my first experience coming here. Also, I came out of I don't know what it was, maybe a 10, 12-hour flight. So my mouth was super dry and I couldn't really spit or anything. So I was in that booth for maybe 4 or 5 minutes just trying to fill up this little tube. But eventually I made it work. I don't know, these containers where you collect blood in, for example, was exactly the same type of thing. Except you just had to spit in it for, in my case, several minutes because I couldn't produce any saliva at that point. It was,
I feel sorry for you.
A little bit awkward.
I do.
I mean, yeah. I should have had some water or something like coming out of the flight, but because also around you, there's people making the sounds like of just spitting
Oh
and
my
stuff.
God.
It wasn't very, conducive to producing some of your own. But I mean, yeah, like it worked. It felt also awkward because then you have to give this tube to someone. I mean, they're just standing there with a tube full of your spit, basically. A little gross, but in the end, I mean, I tested negative, so I guess it was all good. I remember though, so after getting out of the airport, I had to go for quarantine in an airport hotel for 10 days. And on the 10th day, I had to do another COVID test. And I remember going to a local doctor, and he offered me the choice of like getting a saliva test or just a normal, quote unquote, like stick in your nose. And I went for the second option because I didn't want to go through that again.
And after that, you have to travel to Hiroshima.
Yeah, that's right. So from Tokyo to Hiroshima is about 4 hours by the bullet train. And actually, I got great advice from my advisor here to just keep my luggage, give it to the receptionist staff at the hotel, and they would send it to my new address in Hiroshima. Because she really told me, don't go walking around Tokyo Station at rush hour with 2 suitcases. You will annoy the hell out of everybody. So I was just traveling very easily with only my backpack. Managed to buy a ticket at Tokyo Station to go to Hiroshima. And I mean, it was super nice because I was free again after spending 10 days in a small hotel room. So just being able to walk to Tokyo Station and see the whole atmosphere, my first impression of Japanese culture, basically, people just running across Tokyo Station, being in a rush. And then I took the train to Hiroshima. It's a direct train, super nice, super convenient. And honestly, I just spent the better part of the 4 hours looking outside, like looking through the window, being amazed by the fact that I was in a country that actually had mountains, which is quite nice. I remember it was like fall as well, or like getting close to winter. So like the trees were beautifully colored, like all the red and orange and stuff. So yeah, I was just sitting there in my seat, like staring out the window. It's like, wow, I'm in Japan now. It's kind of cool.
Now you have been in Japan for a while. How do you like Japan?
I really like it, actually. I'm really enjoying my time here so far. People always ask me, like, did you experience culture shock, or like it must be so different being here compared to being in the Netherlands? And I mean, in a way, it is different from being in the Netherlands.
I mean, you're.
But I really don't think I.
Well, oh, sorry to interrupt you, but you're so tall. You're white, and you don't speak much Japanese. I mean, you stand out immediately. You don't feel anything strange. You don't feel people are staring at you. You don't feel being treated in a way that...
I mean, definitely, no. Well, people don't stare as much as maybe I would have thought. Children stare. Children stare all the time. It's actually quite cute. Like, sometimes I'm just walking to town randomly, and especially when it's a group of maybe 3 or 4 children with like little school uniforms, they will always like look at you and be like, hello, or like in their best English try and speak to you, which is kind of cute. But I mean, adults don't stare, at least not for the most part. Like they're used to seeing foreigners. The standing out part, like of course I realize like I'm taller than most people, but on some days like where I feel confident, I enjoy the fact that I stand out. I don't know what it is about it, but not being Japanese means that I don't necessarily have to follow the same cultural norms to the letter. I try to some extent, to try and like integrate a little bit. But I know I stand out, so I can make mistakes that Japanese people maybe cannot make. So that I really like about it. I mean, I realize I'm a foreigner, so I can kind of do whatever I want, even if I mess up sometimes. But then, of course, on other days where, I don't know, you're not feeling as confident or there's just other things happening, then it can be a bit annoying that you know that you're always a little bit different from everybody else. I like the time when we were still wearing face masks. You can just cover your face, maybe put on sunglasses in summer, and then, I don't know, you can ignore everything. But overall, I don't really mind it. It's something that you expected from the beginning, and it's something that overall doesn't really bother me. I mean, sometimes you can use it to your advantage because, I mean, you're a foreigner, you're automatically kind of interesting.
But you try to learn some Japanese, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, before coming here, I started learning a little bit, like a tiny bit, just to get started with like the very basics. And then when I came here, I started taking classes at the university itself, which was in the beginning quite fun. So my first semester being here, I started a new class with my friend who arrived there at the same time. So both of us, we were at level 0 Japanese. Well, not 0 anymore because we had both lived here for a few months, maybe like a little bit above 0. And the class we were taking, we're really starting from absolute beginner level. So most of it I kind of knew at that point. Like I could read the hiragana, the katakana, like the simple alphabets, the simple Japanese alphabets. And I could make very, very basic conversation. So it was kind of fun, just sitting in the class, like trying to make jokes in Japanese, those kind of things with my classmates, because we were all kind of bad. And then after the semester ended, we were both like, okay, we're ready for the next level. We can go to class number 2. And the both of us, we started joining the new class. And we were surrounded by people that had been studying Japanese for several years. And the teachers, they would only speak Japanese during the class, like the whole explanation will be Japanese. And I remember just sitting there trying to curl up in the corner, like not make eye contact with the teacher so she wouldn't pick you to like answer whatever questions she was asking. It was terrible. So I think I went for maybe 3 or 4 weeks to that class. And then I realized like, no, I don't want to do this. I'll just start studying on my own a bit more. Yeah. And even nowadays, I sometimes have an online tutor that I do like one-on-one lessons with. I feel sometimes a bit self-conscious about forcing people to speak English here because, I mean, even though English is not my first language, I don't know, I speak it well enough that it's kind of the default language here. Like I don't speak Dutch to anyone clearly. So I feel like I'm always imposing my language upon other people if I start speaking English with them. And I kind of try to avoid that as much as I can. So in general, I would try to speak, or at least initiate a conversation in Japanese. And then if it's really important and I don't know what the hell they're saying, I might ask them if English is also okay. And then the answer is kind of 50-50. For that reason, I do try to learn a little bit of Japanese every day, like study a little bit every day, just so, I don't know, hopefully at some point, maybe at the end of my 3-year contract here, I can keep a basic conversation going. That's kind of the overall end goal. When I first came here, I remember like my goal was after 1 year to be able to speak decent conversational Japanese, as in like I could have a casual conversation with someone about, I don't know, like football or the weather or something. And my goalpost has moved to this now being my goal at the 3-year mark. Maybe I can have a casual conversation about football.
You have been living in Japan for 1 year and a half. And are there something that experience that feel, that's interesting, I didn't know. And you find it funny or you find it surprising?
I guess there's like some small cultural things that they do here in Japan that you don't think of when you come here first. So one thing that I experienced personally is that taking off shoes is not really something that we do in the Netherlands. Like you can enter someone's house with your shoes on, no problem. But then in Japan, there's so many little places where you need to take off your shoes and you cannot always recognize them. So for example, like in one's house, definitely 100%, whatever house it is, you take off your shoes. Then in restaurants, sometimes you will need to do this. So if you are going to be seated not at a normal table, it is one of these lower kind of tables where you sit almost at table height, definitely take off your shoes. But there's also some way more random occasions where this happens. I remember one time I was in a clothing store trying to buy myself a new shirt. So I just picked up a shirt and I would try to go into the dressing room to try on this shirt. So, 30-second thing. So I step in a dressing room and right away this lady comes to me. It's like, no, take off your shoes. And I didn't realize that apparently there's the dressing room is on a small elevated platform. And basically, as soon as you see a little bit of a change in the elevation, this is your cue, like take off your shoes for this. So this is something that I really started looking out for, like living here. And then in particular, because you have to take off your shoes so often in this country, you really want to just wear shoes that you can slip and slide into, basically. I remember in the very beginning, when I was actually looking for a house, I went with some Japanese person that was helping me out to a rental agency. And together with the broker, we would drive to different houses so I could kind of view them from the inside. And I remember every time he would open the door, he would walk in, he would just like in a millisecond slip out of his shoes, drop down 3 pairs of slippers for the 3 of us and walk into the house. Whereas there I came, like untie my shoe, put my shoe away, untie my other shoe, put my shoe away, slip into slipper 1, which is like, I don't know, size 38 for in European sizes, so kind of small for me, slip into the other one and then awkwardly walk throughout the house. spend like 2 or 3 minutes looking at the interior, and then do the whole same process over again, but in the opposite way. Slip into your shoe, tie your shoe. Every time I felt so awkward because they were just waiting outside for me. It's like, come on, we don't have all day. So yeah, when you come to Japan, please wear shoes you can just slip into and slip right out of.
So now when you buy new shoes, you would consider this, whether it's easy to take it off.
Yes. Actually, I was back in the Netherlands a few weeks ago, and as like an early birthday present, my sister gave me a pair of All-Stars, like the high kind of ankle type of shoes. I don't know how to call them.
High ankle skateboarding shoes?
Yeah, maybe like that. These are not things where you can just slip into and out of. So I already know, like, especially in the winter when I'm going to wear those, I'm going to make sure I do this on days that I know I don't have to take off my shoes anywhere except inside my house, so I don't have to just annoy everybody. They're beautiful shoes though, so yeah, thank you, my sister. But
wow. Have you traveled around in Japan?
Yeah, I've traveled a little bit, especially like to some of the other major cities. So one thing that's really great about Japan is that the train network works very well. It's super convenient. So yeah, I visited Tokyo on quite a few occasions because my work is also partially based in Tokyo. So I go there maybe once every 2 months or so, which is quite nice. And then there's a bunch of other cities that are closer by than Tokyo. For example, Osaka and Kyoto are maybe about 2 hours away from here. So those are relatively easy to visit just for like a weekend. And I think my favorite city maybe that I visited so far in Japan is actually Nagasaki. And it's kind of because I'm biased because there's a bit of a Dutch influence in Nagasaki, which I quite enjoy seeing.
Okay, can you tell me why? Why there are some Dutch things there?
Right. So, I mean, I'm not super well versed in Japanese history, but from what I understand is that like several hundred years ago, Japan was really closed off to foreign trade or even foreign influence altogether. I think the Portuguese were the first European people to make contact with the Japanese. And then as soon as they landed here, they started being annoying and trying to convert people to Christianity. So the Japanese kicked them out and were like, no, we're not going to deal with you. Later on, the Dutch came by, and the Dutch, of course, like their only goal is to make money. They don't care about religion too much. So they didn't try to really force their values upon the Japanese. For that reason, they were allowed a very small trading port on a little island called Deshima, which is off the coast of Nagasaki. I think there was maybe even a permanent set of Dutch people just being there and being able to trade with the Japanese. They weren't allowed to leave the island, not at all, but they were allowed to be there. Because of this, there's a little bit of Dutch culture, I guess, spread through that part of Japan. And I think even scientifically, like most of the scientific discoveries happening around that time in Europe were also brought to Japan through the Dutch. Yeah, in Nagasaki itself, there's like some plaques around the city with information about like the Dutch trading post, and there's some Dutch flags, and I think maybe some of the street names might be named after Dutch people too, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
The most Dutch thing though in Japan for sure is like an hour away from Nagasaki, and it's a Dutch theme park basically. So in Japanese it's called Huizen ten Bosse, which in Dutch is Huis ten Bos, or basically the name of the palace where the royal family lives. And this theme park is basically a one-to-one or like to scale replica of some of the famous Dutch buildings. So for example, the main attraction I think is the Dom Tower in Utrecht, which is actually quite funny because the tower, one in Utrecht, it's being renovated, or it has been renovated for like the last, I don't know how many years. So I don't think I've ever actually seen it for real in Utrecht itself in the Netherlands, but I was able to see it in Japan. Actually, the funny thing is, so the reason that they're renovating it in Utrecht is that they're trying to build an elevator into this thing. And the Japanese one already has an elevator, so they're first somehow. So I'm from a small town in the north of the Netherlands called Snake. And we have one famous building. To my great surprise, they actually also replicated this little building to scale in this theme park. Wow. So that was so cute. I remember I took a picture there of me on the Waterpoort, it's called. And I sent it to my grandparents. It's like, look, we're famous. So yeah, that was a really cool place. Like, I know if I can't find another job in astronomy after this, like I will just go and work there. I'll be the local Dutch tour guide.
Oh.
Yeah, it really felt like little Netherlands.
But thinking about Dutch influence, do Japanese people cycle? Are they good at cycling?
They attempt to cycle. I have very strong opinions on this.
What do you mean they attempt?
So okay, the one thing. So I live in a university town. There are students. They don't have a lot of money. Don't have cars. They try to cycle. They do tend to cycle quite a lot. But okay, so somehow, like in Japan, we drive on the left. Like cars drive on the left. It's a rule, no problem. But as soon as Japanese people step onto their bicycles, all the rules go overboard. You can cycle left, right, center. You can do whatever you want. I mean, people holding umbrellas in one hand and then lean with their elbow on the steering wheel, holding their phone in another hand. I mean, well, if you're Dutch, you can do this, except, well, we don't use umbrellas really, but you can bike with your phone, no problem. But the Japanese, I don't know, they're swerving. Whenever they turn, they don't look over their shoulder to see if it's safe to turn. Miraculously, I've never been in an accident, but I think the main reason is that I don't tend to cycle on like the cycling lane / sidewalk, which is a combined thing here. I just cycle on the road and deal with the cars instead because they're less dangerous than the Japanese cyclists.
Oh, wow. I can imagine people cycling on both sides of the road, but how can people cycle in the middle of the road? I have no idea.
I mean, there's some big roads where I guess there's not enough cars to really deter you from cycling in the middle. Or maybe, I don't know, they're just swerving a little bit and they're not keeping an eye on where they actually are.
It's so interesting because we all think Japanese people obey the rules. They have a lot of rules. When it comes to cycling, everything just vanishes.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, they will wait for a red traffic light, even if there's no cars and it's like 3 a.m. in the morning. They will stand there, wait for the light to turn green with their bicycles. But then as soon as the light is green, they just go back to the center of the road and do whatever the hell they want. I'm not sure where this comes from. But yeah, so I cycle on the roads nowadays. And like the cycling infrastructure, I mean, coming from the Netherlands, wherever you go, it's probably going to be much worse. But here, there are some roads where the bike lanes, that sidewalk, the combination thereof is maybe like 60 centimeters wide. So at that point, I just decide to cycle on the road. And sometimes I feel bad that I'm holding up like 20 cars behind me. But then it's also kind of my silent form of protesting to get better bike infrastructure. So maybe I'm trying to bring this Dutch idea to Japan somehow.
Very brave, very, very brave.
Well, I mean, the drivers, the cars are okay. I don't think they will actually hit me. People are too polite for that. But
And I heard that tomorrow you're going to hike. So coming from a flat country, now you have more opportunity to hike. What do you feel?
It's amazing, honestly. Like being able to see mountains from, I mean, not my window, but for example, my university office, yeah, that I can look out over some mountains. I'm a little worried for tomorrow, to be honest, because it'll be like 35 degrees and the humidity is, I don't know how bad it's going to be, but it's going to be really bad. I have one experience walking or like hiking in summer, which is from last year. So there's this one island close by Hiroshima City. It's about an hour away from my house. It's called Miyajima, and it's like the most beautiful place. The most famous thing about Miyajima is that it has a shrine kind of near the beach, which if it's low tide, you can kind of walk on the sand and even touch the shrine if you want to. But then when it's high tide, like the bottom of it will be underwater. So it's like this shrine popping up from the water, which is really beautiful. But in addition to that, they also have a mountain called Mount Misen, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hour hike to get there. And so last year in summer, I don't know why I decided to hike there. I think because I wanted to see like the island in all 4 seasons, because like the nature changes quite a lot. But then it was terrible. So I think I went there around like early afternoon, so kind of the hottest part of the day, because of course I didn't want to wake up early to get there, so I wanted to sleep in and then go there. And then after a long, strenuous hike, finishing all my water and everything, we made it to the top. And knowing there would be like a little observatory deck there where you could get some water and stuff. But it turned out they closed at 4 p.m. somehow, and we arrived there like maybe 4:30 or something. So we were just sitting there for a second, finding some shade. It was like, what are we doing with our lives? I remember going back down, and like Japan is characterized by having vending machines everywhere. And even along this hike, they have a vending machine. So we were like, oh, there's the machine, we're saved. And it turns out it was all sold out already. So I don't know. It's like we thought we were saved and then nothing. But eventually I remember just filling my water bottle in like a local little stream, a little tiny river, just drinking something to stay hydrated, but not drinking enough that I would get sick. Or at least, I mean, if I would get sick, at least I would have a few more hours before the sickness would kick in, I thought. At that point, I would be down from the mountain. But yeah, I think as soon as it was getting dark, we finally made it to the bottom. And we ran into the first restaurant that was just closing, and we begged the guy for giving us some water. And then we were saved. They didn't have to send a body bag back to the Netherlands, so that was good. Yeah, but then I don't know if I'm going to survive tomorrow, because I think it'll be even a bit warmer. So wish me luck, please.
But can you cancel the trip? Why do you have to do it tomorrow if it's so hot?
It'll be hot for the next month, so it's either no hikes or...
Okay, so you're really enjoying hiking?
So there's this one little hike. It's close by my house, actually. I can just start walking from my house. It's about an hour and a half. And you walk up to a little shrine on the mountain. And about a few months ago, I had this big deadline for work. So the day after I submitted these things, I hiked up to the shrine and I prayed for a bit for good luck. So hopefully that has worked. I don't know the result just yet.
Would you like to stay in Japan for some more years after this job?
It's funny you ask, actually, because I put in a job application yesterday for a 5-year position in Tokyo. So yeah, I mean, well, it's academia, right? So you never know where you're going to end up, and jobs are not I don't know, it's hard to get a job in general. But yeah, I'm really liking my time here. I really enjoy it here, and I wouldn't mind staying here for a bit longer. It doesn't have to be Hiroshima, Tokyo is fine, or maybe a bigger city in general would be nice, because where I live right now is not super big. Where I was before in Leiden in the Netherlands is not very big. So maybe it would be cool to live in a big bustling city for some time. But yeah, in general, I'm really happy here, and I wouldn't mind staying around for a bit longer.
Thank you very much, Hiddo, for being our guest and sharing so many stories about your living in Japan.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was fun.
And let's say goodbye to our audience. Bye.
Bye.